Hi, this is Becca. I'm one of the TBB students. This month we're in Plettenberg Bay, South Africa, and our topic of study is the HIV/AIDS crisis. So, to start out with, I want to tell you a little bit about Plettenberg Bay. I'd describe it as having a sort of multiple personality disorder. It's this beach town destination of choice for all these wealthy vacationers, mostly white. And then it's surrounded by these townships, these communities of poor black and colored people where they might be living in, a small but nice one-story house. Some of them are government issue sort of cement block type things. Some of them are bigger. They've had additions. They're painted nicely. They have gardens. And then there are entire townships full of these tiny 10 by 10 shacks made from found wood and rusty corrugated tin. And they call them shelters. And sometimes these tiny little boxes have 6 people living in them, and they don't have running water or electricity, and they're stuffy, and they're light years away from the state-of-the-art housing that, is sitting on the beachfront property, but they're really just, a mile inland. Anyway, we're working with an NGO or non-governmental organization called Plettaid. And part of what Plettaid does is send they're all women, send these women they call home-based care workers out into the townships that the women are from. And they visit patients in their homes and they make sure that they're taking their meds or that they're getting the care they need for whatever disease it is they have. If they have HIV or TB or diabetes or just, bad dog bite. And so, having traveled around the world for 6 months and worked with NGOs in all of the countries we've been visiting, I sort of am interested in how NGOs work and how they're run and the people behind them. So the woman who runs Plettaid's named Mandy, and I wanted to see what made her tick, so I decided to interview her. She's really open and has a lot of interesting things to say about, how she ended up in her job and how she feels about her job and how other people feel about her job, why she thinks her job is important. And so I want to share with you some of what she shared with me, because on the course of this trip I've decided that policy, which is one of the things I'm really interested in, is really important on a big scale, but on a small scale, it doesn't matter what policy you try and implement if there's no one on the ground level there to implement it. And it's these really determined, proactive individuals like Mandy that are making really tangible differences in people's lives. And as much as I'm enchanted with politics, it's not always about soaring rhetoric or rare gifts. It's little things that you're good at and the way you've learned from the experiences you've had in your life that make you who you are. And knowing who you are is what allows you to affect change in the world around you. So that's my 2 cents. Without further ado, let's hear from Mandy. Could you describe your job?
My job?
Yeah, what is it?
Well, when a non-government organisation is constituted, in its constitution usually it says there has to be a director appointed by the board. So that is my job now. When I started, we weren't properly constituted. We didn't have a board, so I was appointed as a coordinator, supposedly to coordinate everybody's HIV activities, all other organisations, as some kind of a person who simply coordinated and networked. But I think I misunderstood what was asked of me in that job. That didn't seem to make much sense. And once we were properly constituted, there were a lot of organizations and government organizations who needed an NGO who would implement. So we started implementing programs and projects.
Having been here for a couple of weeks, people have come up to me and I sit in front of the clinic when we wait for our healthcare worker Pumzit to come get us in the mornings, and people come and talk to us about racism, and they come and talk to us about all sorts of things that people don't actually really talk about that much in the U.S. Like, nobody ever comes up to me and just starts talking about it. I've heard a lot of really interesting things, and I just sort of wondered, what's that like? You're white South African and you work with in like mainly black and colored communities, how is that received?
I've had a 10% negative reception, and it was politicized. I think most of the time when I'm dealing one-on-one with people, we've got a common purpose, that's why we're together, and race falls away completely. The fact that I'm a white person in my post has been highly politicized, and amongst certain activists it is still used against us, but it's more economic. It's more from a black economic empowerment point of view than a racist point of view. So, and I was actually appointed, as I said, before we were properly constituted, I was appointed by an almost completely non-white panel and a majority ANC. They were people from local government who appointed me, because they'd advertised my post for about 6 months and had no applicants. There were no black or coloured who wanted to work with HIV and AIDS. And sometimes I feel that the minute I got going and cracked it, then it looked like I was successful and, you know, I attracted a lot of negativity. In general, it's obviously easier for me to communicate with our coloured staff. Now remember, there are 32 of us and I'm the only white. And I would say I can't think of anyone amongst us where there are bad relations in any way, because we've got a common purpose. Sometimes it's difficult for me to hear where a black person's coming from. You know, black people have a more immediate spirituality than Western people, for example. So something that is said to me, or that I say to a black person, might not seem logical. There's still a lot of miscommunication. And even if I spoke the language, that miscommunication would still be there. So, as regards how our patients and beneficiaries see me, I don't really know. I've had no negative feedback. I've spent a lot of time doing pretty much what you do, sitting outside the clinic talking to people. I've spent the first 2 years were very much in all the townships. But I didn't really have an office. So I was there, you know, and I talked, and, you know, and I'd sit smoking cigarettes with a guy who was released from Robben Island, that high security prison in 1994. And he would say to me, you know, that he's still bitter and he can't transcend his racism. But we're sitting sharing my cigarettes and talking about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's difficult. And for myself, I often don't feel I belong. I often feel like an exile. I feel alienated. But I feel very sure that I'm doing the right thing at the right time.
So then what's the hardest part of all the many, many things that you do?
Fundraising, for sure. I've gotten much better at it. I think I initially thought it would be a case of holding a couple of cake sales, organizing a marathon, you know, just generally. And then I realized that doing that is a full-time job on its own. It takes a lot of time. And it's not the kind of money that we can operate with. So I've learned how to propose to corporates, to negotiate government contracts, and that kind of thing. And that's where the bulk of our money comes from. So fundraising, yeah, that's the hardest part. And of course the emotional part of it, the frustration. We lose a lot of patients, they die. A lot of our patients, we are stymied by lack of access to the care that they should get. It's frustrating. It's frustrating caring for our patients. And then, of course, I left out the women's shelter, which is a big project. And it's run successfully for nearly 3 years. And that has its own heartbreaks, because often that woman who is in a cycle of abuse will go back to the perpetrator.
Yeah. Well, then what's the best part?
The best part?
Yeah.
The best part for me has been the freedom in an NGO to employ someone who may not have had any other opportunity, who may not have had any other qualifications or hopes and dreams, and all of them tend to be carers by nature, and to mentor them and nurture them into taking enormous pride in what they do, because we're not a bureaucracy. So every staff member is very precious, and we treat them like that. And watching the people who work for us grow has been, I think, the best part.
Yeah.
Like Anne is not qualified to do what she does. She shouldn't perhaps be doing it. She never thought in her wildest dream she would be. And she's just turning into a queen, and she's proving that she's a manager. She, will one day, I'm sure, manage the program.
It's really cool.
It is, yeah. And the carers, I mean, they respond so brilliantly to a little bit of respect and acknowledgement and fair treatment, fair labour practice. Fair labour practice plus constant reassurance that they are seen and heard. And it's another thing that I'm very passionate about, is pushing our staff wages, forcing the government. We actually use NGO money to pay our people at a rate higher than anyone else, and then lobby until government meets us on their salary. So we're trying to push this up. Oh, and the hires, when you've sent out proposals, and you get a phone call to say that we've got 100,000 rand, or
it's never a bad thing.
Yeah, it's just like, whoa, it's a big high, and then 2 days later you realize, well, it was exciting, but it's not enough.
So then, how did you end up working with Plettaid? Like, how did you end up as the head of Plettaid? What were you doing before that?
Before that, I was doing my Montessori teaching training. I was working in a Montessori school. Before that, I was a housewife, bringing up my kids. Loved being a housewife. I was a very good housewife, and I took it very seriously. But by training, I was a riding teacher. Very passionate about horses, and I think most people who work with horses are tuned into an emotional field. It's you have to be emotionally aware and clued up to work with horses successfully. So there was that. And then from a personal point of view, as a small child, I had every possible childhood illness, and a single mum, and lots of memories of being home alone in a flat, like from 4 years old, from 7 in the morning till 5 at night, and being very aware that wasn't nice. And then having to care for my grandmother, and she didn't get the best care she could have got in her old age, and she became quite addicted to all the prescription medications that were given to her just carelessly. And with my kids growing up, I became very passionate about holistic health care and not wholesale prescriptions of antibiotics and things like that. I became aware how we're creating superbugs and horrible diseases. And that instead of, and often if someone goes to a doctor, they don't want meds, they want someone to listen to them. So it was the concept of a whole person. So that was why I was interested in working with HIV and AIDS, because I could see that tackling it just as a health issue wasn't going to work. I knew that here I could have more than a job. And all those housewife years, I did sort of half-day jobs so I could earn something and be with my kids in the afternoon. So I learned good things like trust account bookkeeping and team management when I did a commercial housekeeping. I picked up a lot of skills that have stood me in good stead. In fact, it was quite interesting how all those years of doing really horrible jobs just for the grocery money paid off in this job. And I'd be at the office thinking, how do I know how to do this? But I knew how to do it. And it was a lovely feeling.
How do your family and friends feel about your job? How are they affected?
My father, who has been a very absent father, I mean, he hasn't, I think I've seen him once a year since I was 18 months old, But he seems to have turned himself into a one-man NGO in Cape Town. And he's adopted a whole family of township kids who don't have parents. And he pays their school fees. He never paid our school fees. He never paid Mandy's. Anyway, he's looking after these kids. He takes their dogs to the SPCA and cares for them. He has Christmas parties and birthday parties for them in his house. And whatever they need, he just sees to it. He processes their welfare, their clinic visits. So, and everyone is pretty convinced that I've inspired him. And he thinks, okay, if I can, he can too. And I think generally where my family had a good dose of white arrogance, me doing what I'm doing has humbled them. But they're not a support. That's because they aren't there. I mean, my sister lives in Durban, my mother lives miles away, father's there, children are scattered. And to do this kind of work without a home support system is very hard. I mean, my dogs try, and my horse tries, but they can't really, you know. And a lot of friends and people, I mean, white people in my sort of class or sector of life, misinterpret it completely. They say, oh, what a wonderful, good person. They see it as some kind of Mother Teresa mission. And that's not me at all. So there, it's very misunderstood, simply because I'm a white person working in a black area, and it's unusual.
Yeah.
And I hate that. I feel very strongly about it. It really annoys me, because what I'm doing makes economic sense. It fits into the government plan. It is the right thing to do now. And I had the skills from my previous experience, so I'm doing it. I don't see that it's a very jolly goody thing to do. I actually get very cross about that.
So then, I guess there are a lot of answers to this question, but I want to know what you think. What makes your work really important?
Do you know the starfish story?
No.
It's a lovely story. In fact, we've got a big AIDS organization here called the Starfish Foundation. It's this guy was walking along the beach, and because of a freak weather patterns, all these starfish had been washed up on the shore, and they were dying and floundering. And as he was walking along, but there were millions of them. He was chucking those that he could back into the water. And somebody said to him, why are you wasting your time? I mean, what difference does it make? You'll never get them all back in the ocean. And he picked one up and he said, it makes a difference to this one. And chucked it. So it's that.
Yeah.
You know, it's the small context. The context of my life, we're in an epidemic. You've got to stand up and be counted. We've got to be humble. We don't know what the outcome's going to be. We don't know if our interventions are working. But I do know, for the patients and the women and the people we're testing, those ones that we're reaching, it is making a positive difference. So maybe that's important.